Hey everybody, I'm Burak and welcome to Cathlist. Have you ever heard the story of how the hymns Silent Night and Amazing Grace came about? Well, hang on, because you're about to. The first was written by Franz Xaver Gruber in 1818 in the small Austrian town of Oberndorf in Salzburg, and inspired by the broken pipe organ in the nearby village of Arnsdorf. Because they had no working organ, Silent Night was first performed accompanied by guitar. Amazing Grace was written by British poet and Anglican clergyman John Newton. He had grown up without any particular religious conviction and eventually found himself heavily involved in the Atlantic slave trade. His ship was battered in a violent storm off the coast of Ireland in 1748, encouraging him to cry out to God for mercy, a moment that, he said, marked his spiritual conversion. He continued slave trading until 1755, when he began studying Christian theology. Newton was ordained in the Church of England in 1764 and wrote the words we now sing as Amazing Grace to illustrate his New Year's Day sermon in 1773. These are just two of the origins of famous hymns that we will be discussing today on Cathlist. Joyful, Joyful, We Adore Thee by Henry van Dyke is believed to have been written as a repudiation of the gloom and doom in Europe prior to World War I. Set to the music of the final movement in Beethoven's Ninth Symphony, it is a soaring ode to light's triumph over darkness. In fact, it was so moving that the nations of Europe decided to forge a lasting peace and never again considered plunging the continent into the darkness of a conflict unlike any previously known to mankind. Just kidding. Ave Maria by Franz Schubert. This Catholic wedding standard was originally written in English as part of a poem called The Lady of the Lake by Sir Walter Scott. The poem expounds on the legend of King Arthur, who receives Excalibur from the titular lady. Schubert set the words to music, which at that point had been translated into German. He titled it Ellen's Dritter Gesang, whatever, I don't know, Ellen's Third Song, and intended it to be an intercession for a frightened girl, Ellen, to the Virgin Mary. It was not intended to be used for liturgical services, but listeners found it so inspiring that it was translated to Latin to make it more useful for Roman Catholic masses. Here's a fun game. Ask any Catholic, anyone you know, to sing this song, and I bet you they can sing out very exuberantly, Ave Maria. But then they'll stop because nobody knows the other words. Holy, 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 nope, just three. Holy, 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 Lord God Almighty, was written by Reginald Hebner, a bishop in the Church of England. But it wasn't published until his wife found the work in his papers upon his untimely death at the age of 43. It's kind of a downer. I Am the Bread of Life by Sister Suzanne Tulin was one of the first hymns written in English to catch on broadly after Vatican II. Sister Suzanne, a high school teacher at the time, wrote the song during a free period for a music educators conference in 1966. She actually ripped it up and threw it away, except that a freshman girl who was in the infirmary next door to Sister Suzanne's classroom heard her playing the song through the wall. She came in to ask what that song was she had heard, because it was beautiful. Based on that response, Sister Suzanne got it out of the trash, taped it together, and the rest is history. And now it is the most overplayed song in the history of church music. Number 7 on our list competes with I Am the Bread of Life for the most overplayed song. It is On Eagle's Wings by Father Jan Jankes, a priest of the Archdiocese of Minneapolis. And it was named the #1 liturgical hymn by the National Association of Pastoral Musicians in 2006. During his stay with a friend at the seminary in Washington in the late 1970s, the friend was told his father had suffered a fatal heart attack. And Father Jankes composed the hymn based on Psalm 91 to describe God's protection and the hope we can have in His care. The song was first sung at his friend's father's funeral. Side note, Psalm 91 does not mention eagles at all. Father Jankes used that metaphor for the refrain to depict the soaring heights of heaven and the glory we aspire to join when we die. No word on whether the eagle was also dead and thus able to fly to heaven, or if eagles are just that awesome and they can shuttle deceased souls to heaven and still be here on earth. Maybe that's why they're endangered. America. On the more somber side of things, Were You There When They Crucified My Lord is actually an African-American spiritual, most likely composed by slaves in the 19th century United States. It was the first spiritual to be included in any major American hymnal. It appeared in an Episcopal Church hymnal in 1940, and it also reportedly a favorite hymn of famous non-Christian Mahatma Gandhi. We have so many more of these stories, and really they're pretty awesome, but for now we'll end with this, the remarkable story of how O Holy Night came to be. It was written by Placide Cappeau du Rochma. Sometimes I think Brian just likes to torture me with these difficult names. And Adolphe Charles Adams, and it is the best Christmas hymn ever written, period, in my humble opinion. In 1847, Cappeau was a one-handed commissioner of wine in a small town of France. An irregular churchgoer, he was nonetheless asked by his local priest to write a poem for the Christmas Eve Mass. Using the Gospel of Luke as his source, he wrote a poem describing what it would have been like to witness Jesus' birth. He was so impressed with his work, Cantique de Noël, that he decided to set it to music. He employed the services of his friend Adolf Adam, who incidentally was Jewish. He wrote a beautiful piece of music to accompany the lyrics, which impressed poet and priest alike. And 3 weeks later, it was performed at the Christmas Vigil, swiftly gaining widespread popularity in France. Sadly, Capot eventually rejected the church and became a socialist, and Adam's Judaism was discovered. This led church leadership in France to actually ban the song, only for the populace to continue singing it anyway because of how meaningful it was to them. It was at this time that John Sullivan Dwight, an American writer, Unitarian minister, and transcendentalist, discovered the song and appreciated it on a whole different level. He was a fervent abolitionist and heard the lyrics convey an anti-slavery message. Chains shall he break, for the slave is our brother. Hear it? And in his name all oppression shall cease. He published an English translation, and the song became incredibly popular in the U.S. during the Civil War. Legend holds that in the midst of a bloody battle between the French and Prussian armies in the 1870s, a French soldier leapt from a trench in the midst of the battle and belted out 3 full verses of Cantique de Noël. He was followed by a German soldier's vocal performance, both of which prompted a ceasefire. It was like the original The Voice. But wait, there's more. On Christmas Eve in 1906, while Capot and Adam were still alive, albeit aged, a Canadian inventor named Reginald Frassadendadadadad changed the world. He was a professor and the former head chemist for Thomas Edison, and he used a new type of generator to speak into a microphone and broadcast the first words ever transmitted wirelessly across the radio. While not many people picked up his broadcast, those radio operators on ships and in newsrooms did, and they must have experienced the majesty of the moment as out of the blue on Christmas Eve a voice from far away began speaking to them. Ah, the box in the corner is speaking. Not only was he speaking, but Professor Frassadendadad was reading the Gospel of Luke to an unforeseen and astonished audience. He concluded his dramatic reading of Christ's birth by picking up his violin and playing, guess what? O Holy Night. That's all the time we have now, folks. Thanks for watching this episode of Cathlist. If you liked it, give it a big old thumbs up because we like to be emotionally validated every now and then. And subscribe to the channel to see more. Click here if you'd like to learn about Ave Maria Radio, and click here if you'd like to learn about the young adult outreach I direct. And as always, there are links in the description below. I'm Pete Burak, and I'll see you next week. God bless. Here's a fun game. Ask any Catholic you know to sing this song, and I bet you they can, and I will say this again. It was written by Placide Chaput de... I should probably have learned how to say this name before we started this part. Okay. Placide, and then Adolf Charles Adam. Okay, I got that one. What's that one? Charles? It's a tough one. The...